I never thought I'd be the type of person to end up in a neighborhood feud, especially not one involving the homeowners association. But life has a way of surprising you. My name is Marcus Williams, a software developer who works mostly from home. I keep to myself, maintain my lawn, and try to be a decent neighbor. My house is in Oak Ridge Estates, a pleasant suburb with well-kept properties and, unfortunately, an overzealous HOA board with too much time on their hands. When I bought my house 3 years ago, everything seemed perfect. The previous owners had converted the garage into a home office with large windows, ideal for my remote work setup. There was still enough space to park one car in the driveway, with a detached carport in the back for a second vehicle. It was a simple, functional arrangement that worked perfectly for me, until Patricia Henderson moved in next door. 6 months after her arrival, Patricia was elected to the HOA board, and everything changed. Patricia, or Pat as she insisted everyone call her, despite always introducing herself as Mrs. Henderson, homeowner to new residents, was in her mid-50s, with a blonde bob haircut that seemed to get more angular with each passing week. She drove a pristine white Lexus SUV with a personalized license plate that read PATTIME. Every time I saw that plate, I had to roll my eyes. Our first encounter was over my succulents. I had a small collection of them on my front porch. Nothing extravagant, just a few potted plants that added a bit of personality to the space. Apparently, they weren't approved vegetation, according to the HOA guidelines. Patricia made sure to let me know, standing on my porch with a clipboard in hand and a patronizing smile. Marcus, honey, we all have to follow the same rules. It's what keeps our property values high. You understand, don't you? I complied, moving the succulents to my backyard, not wanting to make waves. But Patricia wasn't done. Next came the garbage bins. According to her, they were visible from the street for 30 minutes too long after collection. Again, I adjusted my schedule to bring them in earlier, hoping that would be the end of it. It wasn't. Over the next few months, she nitpicked everything. The color of my mailbox, the bird feeder in my backyard, which she claimed was attracting undesirable wildlife, even the delivery packages that sat on my porch while I was in meetings. Each infraction, no matter how minor, warranted a printed notice in my mailbox, a text message, and occasionally an in-person visit where she would stand just a little too close, smiling that artificially sweet smile. Through it all, I maintained my composure. I complied where I could, hoping that if I followed her ridiculous rules, she would eventually move on. Then came the carport incident, and that was the day everything changed. It was a rainy Tuesday morning, and I was in the middle of an important video call with clients when I heard something unusual. A car horn blaring incessantly from my driveway. At first, I tried to ignore it, assuming someone was just being impatient. But after 5 straight minutes of honking, I had to excuse myself from the meeting and go investigate. Stepping outside, umbrella in hand, I was met with an infuriating sight. Patricia, sitting in her white Lexus, parked under my carport, aggressively pressing the horn while glaring at me through her windshield. I approached cautiously, unsure of what fresh nonsense awaited me. As I got closer, she rolled down her window just enough to speak, but not enough to let any raindrops in. Marcus, you need to move your car. I've been sitting out here getting wet. I blinked in confusion, rain pattering on my umbrella. I'm sorry, what? Your carport was empty, so I assumed you wouldn't mind if I used it temporarily. The street is flooded near my driveway, and I didn't want to risk water damage to my car. She said it so matter-of-factly, as if my property was just some community resource she could borrow at will. I glanced over at my garage. My car was parked inside because I had been bringing in groceries earlier when the rain started. The carport was temporarily empty, but that didn't make it public parking. Patricia, I said, trying to keep my patience intact, I'm in the middle of a work call, and this is my property. You can't just park here without asking. She rolled her eyes dramatically. Well, I'm asking now. Just move your car out of the garage so I can pull in there instead. The carport doesn't have walls and the rain is blowing in. For a brief moment, I was too stunned to respond. The audacity of this woman was truly something else. No, Patricia, I said firmly. I'm not moving my car. This is my property, and I need you to leave now. She glared at me for a solid 30 seconds, as if trying to intimidate me into submission. Then with a huff, she finally shifted into reverse. I'll be speaking to the board about this, she snapped. There should be emergency provisions for these situations. You're being very unreasonable, Marcus. As she backed out, she deliberately drove through a puddle, splashing muddy water onto my shoes and pants. I stood there in disbelief, watching as she sped off down the street, her part-time license plate disappearing into the rain. That evening, I received an email from the HOA. The subject line? Proposed amendment for community emergency vehicle accommodations. The proposal? A new rule that would require residents with excess parking accommodations to make them available to neighbors during emergency weather events. And of course, Patricia was listed as the contact person. I forwarded the email to a lawyer friend who confirmed what I already suspected. They couldn't force me to let others park on my property. With her help, I drafted a firm response, not just to Patricia, but to the entire HOA board, politely but clearly stating that my property was not up for community use. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. Patricia wasn't done. She was just getting started. The following Saturday afternoon, I returned home from a grocery run to find something that left me completely speechless. Patricia's white Lexus SUV was parked inside my garage. Not the carport this time, my actual garage. I sat in my car for a moment, trying to process what I was seeing. How the hell did she even get in? Then I remembered. Months ago, during a routine HOA inspection, Patricia had asked for temporary access to check some wiring on the exterior of my house. She had claimed the HOA needed to verify whether the work done by the previous owner was compliant with neighborhood codes. At the time, I had thought nothing of it and given her the keypad code to the exterior garage door. I never imagined she would abuse it like this. I stepped out of my car, rainwater dripping from the grocery bags in my hands, and found a note taped to the interior door leading into my house. Marcus, had to attend an emergency board meeting. My driveway is being resealed today, and I couldn't park on the street because of the construction on Maple. Used your garage since you were out. Thanks for understanding. Pat. I stared at the note, my grip tightening around the paper. This woman had entered my garage without permission, used my security code without authorization, and left her car in my space like this was some prearranged agreement. I closed the garage door, went inside, and immediately changed the keypad code. Then I took one more precaution. I disabled the manual override button inside the garage by removing its battery. Finally, I sent Patricia a text message. Me. I see you've parked in my garage without permission. The code has been changed. Please contact me when you return so we can discuss this breach of privacy. 3 hours later, Patricia. Marcus, I need to get my car. Please open the garage. I let her wait 15 minutes before responding. Me. I'm in a meeting. I'll be free in an hour. In the future, please don't enter my property or use my garage without explicit permission. 10 minutes later, my doorbell started ringing. Checking my security camera, I saw Patricia standing outside, repeatedly pressing the button while talking animatedly on her phone. I let her wait another 30 minutes before I finally opened the door. The moment she saw me, she burst into a tirade. "This is completely unacceptable," she snapped, her face flushed with anger. "I have been waiting for almost an hour. I have an important appointment, and you've essentially held my vehicle hostage. I could call the police for this." I leaned casually against the doorframe, keeping my tone calm. "For what exactly?" I asked. "You entered my property without permission, used a security code that was provided for a specific one-time purpose, and left your vehicle in my private garage without consent. If anyone should be calling the authorities, it would be me." Her expression tightened, but she quickly regained her usual air of self-righteousness. "It was an emergency," she insisted. "My driveway is being resealed." "That's not an emergency, Patricia," I replied deadpan. "That's a scheduled maintenance issue that you knew about in advance and failed to plan for. You could have asked a friend to drop you off or called a ride-sharing service." She crossed her arms. "Just open the garage now." "I'm already late." I shook my head. "We need to be clear about boundaries first. Do you understand that what you did was inappropriate and a violation of my privacy?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "You're blowing this way out of proportion," she hissed. "Neighbors help each other all the time. Help that is requested and agreed upon? Yes. Not help that is taken without permission." I folded my arms, standing firm. I need you to acknowledge that you overstepped before I opened the garage. She looked like she was about to explode. Her face had turned a concerning shade of red, and I could practically see the steam coming out of her ears. Finally, after a long pause, she gritted her teeth and muttered, "Fine. I should have asked before using your garage. Now will you please open it?" It wasn't exactly a heartfelt apology, but it was probably the best I was going to get. I nodded and reached for my phone, activating the garage door opener. "And," I added, "I need you to delete the old code from your phone. It won't work anymore, but I want to be sure you don't have it." She reluctantly pulled out her phone, opened her notes app, and deleted something while showing me the screen. The garage door slowly lifted, and Patricia marched past me without another word, got into her Lexus, and sped out of my driveway. I watched her go, fully expecting this to be the last of her nonsense. But the next morning I woke up to a notice from the HOA taped to my front door. It read, "Violation Notice. Home Office Conversion Non-Compliant. Your garage must be restored to its original functional parking space within 30 days to comply with HOA regulations." This was a direct attack. The previous owners had obtained all the necessary permits for the conversion. I had all the documentation proving it was compliant. The HOA had never raised this as an issue in the 3 years I had lived here. Patricia was clearly retaliating. I forwarded the letter to my lawyer, who immediately saw through the pettiness. "They can't retroactively enforce a rule against something that was already approved," she assured me. "This is pure harassment. I'll draft a response." That evening, I was still fuming over the notice when I heard a car pull into my driveway. I checked the security camera feed, expecting to see a delivery driver. Instead, I saw something that made my blood boil. Patricia's white Lexus was in my garage again. The garage door had been opened because I had been bringing in yard tools earlier, and she had apparently just helped herself to my space once again. This time, there was no note, just the brazen assumption that my garage was available for her use. A calm determination settled over me. If she wanted to play games, I could play too. But unlike Patricia, I would stay firmly within legal boundaries. I closed the garage door using my phone app. Then I went to the hardware store. An hour later, I returned home with a heavy-duty padlock and hasp. I installed the lock inside my garage, ensuring that no one, not even Patricia, could open it from the outside. Then I sat in my living room, sipped my tea, and waited. This time, Patricia was going to learn a lesson she wouldn't forget. At exactly 9 p.m., I heard the doorbell ring. Checking the security camera, I wasn't surprised to see Patricia standing there, furiously pressing the button over and over again. She tried the keypad code, the one she wasn't supposed to have anymore, multiple times before pulling out her phone, likely texting me in frustration. I took my time answering. Finally, I opened the door, keeping my expression calm and neutral. "Patricia, what can I do for you?" She forced a strained smile, her voice sugary sweet but laced with irritation. "Marcus, honey, the garage door seems to be malfunctioning. I need to get my car." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, you mean my garage door? On my property?" Her smile faltered slightly, but she quickly regained her composure. "I was in a hurry and you weren't home. The door was open, so I assumed it would be fine. It's just for a few hours, no big deal." I crossed my arms. "It's not fine, Patricia. We just had this conversation yesterday. You knew this was inappropriate, yet you did it again." Her expression hardened. "Look, I don't have time for this. Just open the garage." I shook my head. "I've installed a manual lock inside for security purposes. You understand, right? After finding unauthorized people in my garage, I felt it was necessary." Her eyes widened in shock. "You locked my car in your garage? That's illegal. You can't hold my property hostage." I kept my voice even and measured. "I secured my own property after repeated invasions of privacy. Your unauthorized parking doesn't give you any rights here. But don't worry, I'll be happy to open it. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Her mouth fell open in outrage. "Tomorrow morning?" she shrieked. "That's outrageous. I need my car now. And I needed you to respect my property and privacy. But we don't always get what we need, do we?" Patricia stared at me, phone still in her hand, calculating her next move. "I'll call the police," she threatened. I shrugged. "Feel free, Warren," I said. I have security footage of you entering my garage without permission, documentation of our previous conversation, and a lawyer on retainer who will be fascinated to hear about this pattern of harassment. I'm sure the officers would be very interested in all of that. Her face turned red, her nostrils flaring as she realized the position she was in. After a long, tense silence, she finally lowered her phone. "This isn't over," she said in a low, seething voice. "The board will hear about this." I smiled. "I'm sure they will, along with my lawyer, and possibly the local news if necessary. I've documented everything, Patricia. Every notice, every text, every security footage clip of you entering my property without permission. If you want to escalate this, I'm prepared." For the first time, I saw something in her expression that wasn't arrogance or self-righteousness. It was uncertainty. After a long pause, she huffed, turned on her heel, and stormed off down the street, presumably to call someone for a ride. The aftermath. The next morning, 9 a.m. sharp, I unlocked the garage and let Patricia take her precious Lexus. She didn't say a word to me, but the story didn't end there. The following day, I received an official-looking envelope from the HOA. It was a notice of an emergency HOA meeting scheduled for the next evening. Agenda item number 1, parking violations and property use restrictions. And of course, Patricia's signature was at the bottom. I attended the meeting with my lawyer. The moment Patricia saw us walk in, her expression changed, a mix of surprise, anger, and unease. She presented her case, spinning a tale about community cooperation and how certain residents, me, were hostile to neighborhood values. Then I handed out printed documentation of her repeated trespassing, retaliatory notices she had sent me, attempts to change HOA rules targeting me, security footage of her entering my property without permission. To Patricia's visible horror, other neighbors began chiming in with their own stories. Apparently, I wasn't the only one she had been targeting. She had been selectively enforcing HOA rules, issuing petty violations, and harassing homeowners for years. It turned out I had sparked a rebellion. "This meeting is about parking violations, not personal grievances," Patricia snapped, her voice rising. Howard, one of the more reasonable board members, cleared his throat. "Actually, Patricia, this meeting is about community concerns, which clearly extend beyond parking." The meeting concluded with a plan to review HOA governance procedures. 2 weeks later, Patricia was removed from the board. 3 weeks later, she listed her house for sale. On the day she moved out, we locked eyes across the street. I gave her a small wave. She gave me a tight nod before driving away in her Lexus, the one that still had the PATTIME license plate. I never saw Patricia Henderson again. A lesson worth remembering: Oak Ridge Estates became a much better place to live after Patricia was gone. The new HOA leadership, led by Howard, took a more balanced approach to neighborhood governance. No more petty notices, no more power trips. As for my garage, I removed the padlock, but I kept the security cameras. Some lessons are worth remembering, even after the teacher's gone.